All right, so let's talk query selectors and all the cool things we can do with them. All right, so here we've got query selector with an ID, which we use a hashtag just like we would do with CSS. And then we have query selector all to get all the elements. And then here we have this dot to denote class. Now remember, query selector is going to give you back one object, right? Query selector here is going to give you back one object, a singular thing. Query selector all will give you all the objects on the page. That means it's going to give you an array of objects. We know how to work with arrays. We've been able to do for loops with arrays. We've been able to do accessing arrays index. We know a bunch of its elements. So all that stuff we learned about arrays is going to come into play here because, well, your page is probably going to have more than one element with a certain class. That's why we use classes in the first place. If there's only one, you would use an ID. So if we have things with multiple elements for the class, I want to get all of them. Remember, if you use query selector, it gets the first element it finds with that property. But after it finds the first thing, it stops. It's like, okay, I found it. Okay, if there's more, it won't give them to you. So query selector is only ever going to give you one thing. Okay, that is the biggest thing you got to remember about this. It gives you one thing back. Query selector all will give you an array of things. All right, so we learned how to do it with IDs, and we also learned how to find things with their class. Remember, there was also its little brothers, get element by ID and get elements by class name. It does the same thing. Okay, I don't care which one you use. All right, but also you can go ahead and get things by their tags. So for example, if I do H1, that's why query selector is kind of cool, is because you don't, like, if you do get element by ID, you have to put in an ID. Like that, like it's a very narrow function. Query selector is not really narrow. It's basically like you give it what you want and it will figure out what, like, based on what you give it, and we'll go find things. So it's very flexible in that regard. All right, so if I want to find the header tag, all right, I'm going to say let header equal document.querySelector h1. All right, I'm going to console log it. One big tip in this stage of your development career, I would console log these variables so you get a sense of what these things actually are. All right, so you understand like you're dealing with a very complex object. It's an object that has lots of properties. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and save this, and then cool. I console logged H1. I think I made a mistake with my HTML. Okay, cool. Oh, I gotta save the HTML. All right, it's cool. All right. Let's refresh. There we go. Okay, so here's the object. Okay, so just to remind you, let header equal document.querySelector h1. This is an object. If you want to know what's in the object, here it is. I hit this arrow. It gave me all of the stuff about the object. Most of this is going to be null, but it does give you some information about this object. So it looks like each individual node in our HTML page has some properties to it, some information. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put class equals Fido. I don't know. Random word. I'm going to give it a class. I'm going to come back here. Notice how, okay, it changed a bit. So if I go here, I'm going to scroll up a little bit, right? We have class name and things like that. So it looks like it changed based on what the thing was. So depending on what classes you put in and what other information you might put inside the tag, it will get saved into that object. That's why we use this. All right, so I'm able to target things. I'm able to target tags, p tags, lists. Okay, whatever you want to do, you'll be able to target them with query selector. After you target them, you say, okay, I've targeted the thing, and now I would like to change a property of it. But let's talk a little more about how we can target things, because there's a couple more examples we can do that are a little more advanced. So I've got some HTML here. It's got two divs on line 7 and 8. On line 7, the title is box 1, and on line 8, the title is box 2. These are called attributes. You can think of it just like, hey, this tag needs a little bit more information in it. That way I can use that information. So I'm going to give this, this div title box 1 and this div title box 2. Sweet. Alrighty. You're like, okay, well, what if I wanted to, let me save this. What if I wanted to target this one, this div on line 7 versus this one? Obviously, if I target div, right, I'll get both of them. if I target, like say div to get the first one, I'll get this one, but what if I don't want that one? Like, how can I be sure that I get the specific one I want? Because remember, HTML changes, right? So one day you use queries. Let me actually just demonstrate this. All right, we'll get to this in a second, but let me show you what the problem is. All right, let's say I said one day, all right, I want to target this first div. All right, so we're going to let first div equals document dot query selector, okay, and we're just going to say div. Cool. And then we're going to do first div dot inner HTML equals I changed it. Cool. All right, let me get rid of the live preview real quick. I'm going to save all the things and the stuff. And we're going to go ahead and I'm going to preview this. All right, cool. So you got the first div, right? Because I remember I use query selector, right? Query selector will get the first div and that'll be it. It won't touch this one because once it's found this div, it will never go to the second one. And so I'm like, yay, I did my job, okay? But remember, 6 months later, okay, some other dev is going to go to the HTML file and they are going to make some changes. Okay, so some other dev who is not you came in and they added a div on line 7 above the one that was previously there. And now your JavaScript is messing up with their work, right? Because they're just like, why isn't my thing working? I made a change, it should show up on the screen. And so what ended up happening was that your thing is overriding their thing. And they should look at the JS, but this causes a lot of like confusion, right? Because remember, JavaScript files can be very big and HTML files can be very big. So at the time, getting the first div tag on the page worked, but if the HTML changes, that will no longer work. Okay, I want you to like consider this for a second. Your old strategy of, hey, I'll get the first div tag on the page and make my changes worked so long as the div you wanted to change was the first one. Okay, the second that was no longer the case, your code doesn't work anymore. All right, so we want to be thinking towards the future. If the code changes, how can I make certain that when people make changes, my old changes won't break, okay, or cause confusion? Well, this is like not specific enough because I don't really just want the first div. Let's say I want a div with the title of box 1. Okay, that's the one I really want. All right, so I'm going to uncomment this. Highlight the thing. There we go. All right, so in these sorts of cases, we can look at what are called attributes and use attributes with this square brackets. Okay, so you'll have single quote, square bracket, and then the attribute you're looking for, in this case, title. So there are a bunch of these little symbols. Star equals means contains. Okay, we're going to learn more, but star equals means contains. So what this is saying is I want to find all of the elements on the page with the attribute of title that contains the word box. So that will give me this one and this one because they contain box, right? So that way, if I, for example, let's say someone else puts something else in here, right? So I'm going to change this around. So I want the first thing that says box. So I'm going to do let first div equal document.query selector. Okay, title star equals. Okay, let's see. So this the outside needs to be single quotes because inside we're going to put a quote. Cool box. Okay, so you see how I did my change is no longer affecting their change? Because what I'm saying is that I want to get the first thing on the page that has a title of box. So they can go ahead and put their div in here all they want to. They can put as many divs on top of as they want to. I will be able to get specifically this one. So targeting your elements on the page very specifically is a bit of an art form Because again, HTML is free form. You can put whatever tags you want in there. You can set things. You can add classes willy nilly. So does have to be some discipline, but it's very very important that you think about how you're targeting your elements, so that in the future, in case there's a change, your what you did originally won't necessarily break. So this is kind of a cool way of doing it. So like for example, attributes, you can do attributes like contains or does not equal and all sorts of good stuff. And remember, the same thing applies. Query selector all will get everything. Query selector will get the first. So just to save this and kind of show you what it looks like. Okay, oh I gotta do this one. This is a different one than the other one. Okay, and then I will open up in browser and open it F12. All right, and so see, like you got node list, right? This is all of them. So 0 and 1, each is their own individual object, whereas query selector just gave you the like one. Okay, the first one it found and that's it. Okay, so that's the difference, but like doing things by attributes can be a very cool way of very specifically targeting things such that in the future your changes won't get accidentally overwritten and a lot of devs will have their hair on fire trying to figure out why things are broken. All right, so that's how you can target things with attributes, and that's also why we use query selector and why it's so powerful.